such a bad time to move jobs right now. I have some pretty big takeaways coming out of this interview phase. This is honestly kind of like my best kept secret when it comes to interviewing, and I feel like UX Twitter might come at me for this. Always go back to when I'm interviewing is my study guide. If you know me and this channel, you know I like to keep it real, so today we're gonna turn up the heat a little bit and it's going to get spicy. In this video, I'm gonna go over my thoughts, my opinions, some really good advice when interviewing for a job in the UX industry, especially during this time where you have tech layoffs and hiring freezes and fears of a recession. But it's also really good for if you're just interviewing in general. Fair warning, this video might get kind of lengthy, so make sure to remember to use the chapters below and skip around if you need to. And of course, as a quick disclaimer before I get into anything else, these are all my personal opinions. They are not tied to any specific company or any specific person, so per usual, don't come at me, bro. So before we get down to business, this section is purely going to focus on observations and things that just made me be like, what? An observation that really stood out to me this time was that I felt like every single position that I saw out there was a senior UX design position. I'm comparing this back to 2018 when I first started interviewing as a UX designer. And of course there were senior product design or senior UX design positions back then. But this time around, the amount of them I swear has increased exponentially. It truly did feel like to me that every single role was asking for an insane amount of years of experience. So here's my hot take on this. I think this is residual from a lot of entry-level UX designers coming into this industry and companies essentially like weeding them out by putting this ambiguous number of years onto the job description. And so that way they're like setting the bar almost too high when in reality, instead of 5 to 7 years, I know for a fact they would take 3 to 5 years. My second hot take on this, and I feel like UX Twitter might come at me for this, but I have never truly believed in equating the number of years to the performance and competence of a designer. This UX industry is still considered pretty new. And so that means companies are so spread out when it comes to UX maturity. And that also means the types of resources that that designer has. So one designer could be a part of a company that really values UX and lets them do a bunch of research and constantly talk to customers and give them every single tool that they need in order to go through a design process and make those types of decisions. But another designer just as good could be a part of a company where they can't even speak to their customers. They can't even talk to the users to truly understand if the product is helping them. And that's why I've always been pretty empathetic when it comes to interviewing designers, because I truly believe that there are multiple facets that make up a good UX designer. So having a number of years being a strict criteria can potentially be really harmful for this industry. Second observation that I saw while I was interviewing, there were so many design system roles. Yes, you're still a product or a UX designer, but you really focus on designing the systems and tools to ensure that the experiences are at scale. I was really surprised by this because back in the day, like aka 3 to 4 years ago, I did not see many roles that were really dedicated to design systems. Honestly, I don't even know if I saw any roles. But clearly there's been a shift now that there are more UX designers and UX design is becoming a more important aspect in creating a product. And for me, like the biggest takeaway for this one is that it made me think about myself as a designer. Like I don't have that much experience in design systems. That was never anything that was taught when I was in boot camp. It really made me reflect on my own career and think like, hey, this might be something that I might want to learn, or it might be something that's important to learn in the future in order to really stand out. All right, this next observation is an observation that I was really bummed to see, and that is that remote work is probably a dying breed. When I interviewed back in 2020, as we all know, most jobs, if not all, were remote. But this time around, I was seeing a lot of on-site positions. Mostly in the FANG companies, like the very big tech companies, wanted you on-site in the office in big city hubs like LA, San Francisco, or New York. Now this already severely narrowed down my pool in my search because I'm in San Diego and I don't live in any of those cities. So my take on this is that I think it's super unfortunate. I actually used to be a non-believer of working from home, especially as a UX designer, because I genuinely believe that you had to be in the office with your PMs and your engineers in order to collaborate. But now that I've been doing this for like almost 3 years, I genuinely don't understand how you wouldn't be able to do the work that you can in the office outside, especially now that there are so many amazing collaborating tools. And also from a recruiting standpoint, if you think about it, you get the luxury of being able to bring in talent from all different types of geographies instead of pigeonholing to one specific area. Morty, did you get on the Morty, stop. I know you want to be on camera. For me, I think it's so important to spread the wealth. Not even just in this country, but even internationally. It's actually considered part of like the culture that I'm looking for and value when I see a company that's willing to hire remote employees. Okay, this final observation honestly just blew my mind and I was super relieved. And that was that I had no take-home challenges, no whiteboard challenges, and no app critiques. So this is a very hot debate in the UX industry, so I'm just going to give you like my personal take on it. And I have never been a fan of any take-home challenges or like any types of like assignments in a UX design interview outside of portfolio presentations. These days, especially as a UX designer working at a tech company, it is like a 6-round process, talking to like 5 different people each time.
And then like bringing your portfolio presentation that I worked like 40 hours on. But then if I had to on top of that do an app critique and like get ready for that, or also do like a whiteboard challenge on the spot,
I'm just like, when will I be enough? Like, how much more could I show you in order to feel confident that I could actually do the job? I just feel like we're already asked so much of us. And honestly, who knows? Like, they still obviously exist. Maybe I just got kind of lucky, but I was applying to medium to like larger tech companies and not one of them had that in their interview process. Back in the day, I applied to a lot of startups and I had to do a ton of those things. I did a whiteboard challenge once, I did an app critique once, and I did a take home. So I don't know if like this is just the times are changing or if it's the company specifically, and honestly it's probably a mix of both, but I just found that really interesting and also just honestly just so relieving that I did not have to go through that. Okay, so I am done with my rant, so let's get professional. I have some pretty big takeaways coming out of this interview phase. The first one is studying up. I talked about this very briefly in my other videos, but I'm going to go into it much in detail here. The one tool that I always go back to when I'm interviewing is my study guide. It's basically a big fat mondo list of potential questions from any type of person that you would talk to in a UX interview. And it's also questions that I've seen in the past when I've interviewed at over like 20 companies 4 times as a UX designer. So I know you're probably wondering, Mimi, come on, cough it over. Okay, but before that though, I want you to hear what it is. Aside from it being a list of potential questions from engineers, design, hiring manager, recruiters, it also includes some questions that I personally experienced when I was going over my portfolio presentation and an app critique. Now that's something that I had not seen in the past. Every time I look up on Google, like what kind of questions are typically asked during a UX design interview, I had no idea that there could be so many questions that were asked during a portfolio presentation. A lot of the times the panel would kind of like interrupt and ask a question, and I absolutely was not ready for that, and it scared the living daylights out of me. So then I started collecting all the questions that I was typically asked or that I could see being asked during a presentation. Now in this study guide, there will not be answers to these questions because everyone's experience is completely different and I have no idea what you have done up until this point. Now here's the kicker, because I'm always really honest with you. This study guide is not going to be free. I've worked really freaking hard on this, and this is years and years of me collecting these questions and really looking at patterns over the course of 4 years and talking to 40 companies as a UX designer. So if you'd like to get a comprehensive list of all these potential questions while also supporting this channel, great. Feel free to check out the link in my description. And if not, absolutely no big deal. You can still get a lot of good insights from all this free content on YouTube, and I still very much love you. This is honestly kind of like my best kept secret when it comes to interviewing, so I truly hope it relieves any type of anxiety, especially when it comes to uncertainty during interviews. My second takeaway is being okay with saying no. I remember back in the day when I interviewed for my first UX design job, I was not strict on who I ended up interviewing with. To be completely honest with you, I turned a blind eye to a lot of red flags because I just wanted to get in. Don't regret it in any case. Like, I understand why I did what I did, but I think it would have been nice if I didn't get so sucked into that desperation. So this time around, I was really picky on where I ended up applying to, where I decided to continue on in the interview process. There are a lot of companies where I just bowed out midway through because it just wasn't really fitting what I was looking for culturally, or, you know, the products or responsibilities. And honestly, moving forward, it made me feel so confident going into new interviews, and I felt really strong in my decision making. Plus, I wanted to truly be excited about the job offer because everything fit what I was looking for instead of me trying to fit them. This next big takeaway is so interesting because it feels like nothing has changed from when I first became a UX designer, and that's that I struggle with my portfolio. The amount of times I just wanted to take my laptop and like break it over my legs and just like scream bloody murder was countless. I honestly just needed to take my own advice and give up on my portfolio at some point because it was just driving me up the wall. So I embraced the fact that my portfolio was definitely my own worst enemy. It was my kryptonite, and just succumbed to the fact that whatever was on that website and whatever was on those slide presentations is going to be enough. I had to really go back and understand the assignment and really think about what mattered the most. So when I was up at night working on a Venn diagram for like 3 hours, and I was going back and forth between like Figma and Canva because like I can't do Photoshop for shit. Really taking a step back and being like, is this what is going to make the hiring manager like reject your application? Have an engineer tell the rest of the panel that that Venn diagram is not gonna help me get the job. Absolutely not. And so it's definitely a work in progress, something that, you know, I'm going to probably come up against every time I interview because I'm the type of designer who only works on their portfolio when they need to, not because they should. I'm not the type who like grows and maintains it and comes back to it and makes sure that it's like a living, breathing thing. I literally let it die until I have to interview again, and that's probably not the most efficient way to make use of my time, but it's something that I learned during this round that I really need to think about working on my portfolio before I get into the entire interviewing process because it just sucked up so much of my time that could have been spent elsewhere. Okay, my last takeaway, and this one's kind of a no-brainer, and if you are interviewing right now, you're gonna wanna listen to this, but please, please do not give up, but also I want you to take breaks. For me during this time, it was tough because I was being told it was such a bad time to move jobs right now. Between what's going on in the tech space with like layoffs and hiring freezes and a potential recession coming down the line, I really was taking a risk here, but I really truly felt like this was my time. I remember I wrote a quote down on my whiteboard during this time, and it was, "You didn't come this far only to come this far." And honestly, the funny thing too is that like my previous company, I really liked working there. But once I start something, I just can't quit. And I just refuse to give up. I mean, I am typically that type of person. Like once I start on something, I will not stop until I get what I want. But like, I'm not gonna lie, I had some major lows where I was told that the role was being frozen or the role no longer existed, or, you know, so many rejections and my portfolio just driving me nuts because I'm a perfectionist. And so I would stop tinkering with it and I would just take a break. But all that really matters is like whether or not you're gonna get back up from that break. And looking back, yes, it was a very stressful 2.5 months of my life dedicated strictly to finding a new job. In the grand scheme of it, it was really not that long. It's really just a blip in time. So if you're trudging in the mud right now and you just feel like you can't reach your goal, take a break. Let yourself heal for a bit and then get back out there. It doesn't even matter if it's slow, but as long as you really think of the long game, hard work will pay off. If you're curious about how I landed my first UX design job right out of boot camp and some more interviewing tips, then you're gonna wanna watch this video here.